Welcome to TAIP Conversations, a series of discussions of issues surrounding the international early childhood education community in Japan.
Hi, good morning. Welcome to TAIP Conversation. This is me, John, and I'll be hosting the podcast for today. And I think that today we have a very, very good topic to talk about, especially in the schools here in Japan. And it's all about inclusive education. And we all know that inclusive education is such a sensitive and I wouldn't say controversial topic, but it's something that we need to look at. And together here with me is Miss Alisha Smyth Yamamori.
Yamamori.
Yeah, Yamamori, sorry.
No worries.
Yes, and we've got Nikolai Jessen-Peterson, also known as Mr. JP. So I would like to ask if you could please introduce yourself, and let's start off with Miss Alisha.
All right. I am the head of school at Yokohama Christian School. I've been the head of school there for about 5 years. I've worked there for the past 10 years. And it's a school that has evolved from just a preschool to reaching into elementary education as well. And I would say about 7 years ago, maybe, we took a hard look at being more inclusive as a school and wanting to, as a Christian school, we look at children maybe a bit differently than secular schools do as children of God, and that each child deserves to have a good education. And so that is the root of our desire to be inclusive as a school.
Wonderful. And Nikolai?
Hi, my name's Nikolai. I'm the student support coordinator at Tokyo International Progressive School. And we're also a classroom teacher there too. And we're a school that is a small school, I guess, relatively. And so that's kind of, for us, we cater towards students who may prefer learning in a small environment. And that we're a school, I think, that's quite diverse in terms of neurodiversity and also I'd say all kinds of diversity. And so that's it, I guess. I don't know what else to add.
I'm actually very excited right now, and the listeners that we have in this podcast, I'm pretty sure they're going to be educators and also some parent educators or educator parents, and I think this is going to be beneficial for all of them, that there are some schools that exist that can cater to different learning needs of the child. And as you said, Nikolai, in the previous introduction that you have, the neurodiversity. And I think this is one topic that we have to touch a little bit, but of course we will go through as a school, right? Because my school is still a baby and it's just turning 2 this year. And I feel that I have a lot of things to learn from you both. And you from Tokyo International Progressive School, Nikolai, and Miss Alisha from Yokohama Christian School. And you've been here and you've been doing this for a long time. And I'm so excited to do this with you both. And so let's get to the first question. So number one question that we have thought about is, what are some of the unique challenges faced when working on inclusion in Japan? So Miss Alisha, would you like to take on this?
Sure. Well, I think those of us with a more Western background in understanding inclusion and understanding especially early diagnoses, things like ASD and even ADHD and other things like that, so that we as educators can help our students as best as possible. That isn't really understood well in Japan. Mm-hmm. Most students who come to us around 5 and 6 may have no diagnosis. There's only a suspicion of maybe something is different about my child. Mm-hmm. And certainly a lot of physicians won't recommend any student to be diagnosed before about age 5 or 6. Right. Now, us as educators know that early intervention is often what is advocated for in kind of the Western context, especially. Mm-hmm. And it's very difficult to kind of get my head around why there is such a time lag in Japan. And I think for parents, there's a lot of lack of education. There's a lot of roadblocks to get the information they need if they are dealing strictly with the Japanese context. And even if a family moves to Japan and has paperwork, has a diagnosis, then there's the other side, which is they have done due diligence. They've got the early diagnosis, they've done early interventions, they come to Japan and they cannot find a school for their child because they are not willing to sit. Many schools are not willing to sit down and have a conversation, meet the child, actually see if their school is a good fit. Some of that has to do with larger schooling environments in general, but there's a lot of difficulty when you have the early diagnosis happening and then arriving in Japan and finding all the roadblocks back in place. So,
right. And it's very interesting because I think I'm a firm believer of early intervention as well. And I think like the earlier, the better, to be honest. And I think in one of the courses that I was taking up the other day, one professor said that early intervention can actually have a huge difference in terms of developing this child, especially when they are suspected with ASD or speech delay or any intellectual disability. And I think it's very important, right, to have the diagnosis. But you're right, I've experienced it, like some parents, they don't want to do this and they have to wait it out. They always say the word, let's wait it out, right? And I think in a way it's giving them, I'm always giving them the benefit of the doubt whether they want to see the potential of the child. But at the same time, if there is really what we need to address in terms of the development of child, we have to. And I think it's very important to be aware. And I think parent education, as you said, is also very important. And Nikolai, how about you? What's your take on this?
Yeah, I think right now it was just mentioned. I mean, early intervention is very important because it allows from an early age to identify what are also strategies for the challenges. And I think what happens, if this doesn't take place at that early stage and there aren't clearly identified strategies for the challenges for the student, the self-esteem takes a hit over time. When they reach a certain age, I mean, self-esteem is the starting point for successful learning, and in many cases where the learning can't take place without a proper healthy self-esteem towards my ability to learn. And so early intervention can support with identifying what are the challenges and what are effective strategies. And there can be even added difficulties if there has to be some sort of stability as well with who the student's working with and the strategies that are being used. And so that's an extremely important word. In terms of the original sort of just the question about inclusive education in Japan, this is just my sort of standpoint on this.
Yes.
I did my master's of education. I have my master of education in international education. I also have my master of education in special education. When I was doing my master of education in international education, my thesis was about this topic, right? And of support for families, international families who are searching for educational opportunities for a child who has learning differences.
Yes.
And definitely one of the main sort of areas that's important for inclusive education is the ability of teachers to have the capacity, like the ability to support students and understand students on an individual basis, but also have the energy to do so.
Right.
And of course, every teacher is a human being with a limited sort of amount of both physical, mental energy. And so I'm glad for this podcast, I always just try to, any questions I have, lingering questions, I research it. And I knew already the number of teachers in Japan in 2022 reached its lowest in terms of, and again, so this is from a limited amount of research. I have to do even more, but
Right.
it was its lowest in terms of any teachers applying to be able to teach, to qualify,
Mm.
be a qualified teacher who can teach.
Yes.
And not only that, the number of teachers who have left due to any sort of mental illness has been increased to the highest as well.
Mm.
So in Japan as well, the class sizes average is quite high.
Yes.
And so the ability for inclusive education to be successful, there has to be, this is my standpoint, a small setting where each student can be understood at an individual level.
Right.
In terms of, okay, what are the challenges that they have?
Mm.
How can, and differentiation as well. For it to be successful, there has to be, you know, the smaller the class size, I think the more likely it can take place. And that the added benefits to that are, there are plenty more as well. But like you said, I don't want to
Yes.
talk
Yes.
for too long. But and so if teachers receive more support, and this starts from on a large scale with the government, but also like an understanding of sort of teachers and the work that they do,
Yes.
because they're in front of the students every single day, spending a large amount of time with the students. It would also increase, I'd say, the interest in teacher and people who want to be teachers. And I was reading, I think it's also the case in the United States, where the number of teachers applying to be teachers has been decreasing.
Yeah.
And what I was reading, there was an article saying that a lot of the teachers who are leaving educations are the ones who, you know, are really care about teaching. They love education, they love teaching, but they're so exhausted
Yeah.
and disillusioned in a way with, I'm trying and trying and trying. And so in Japan as well, I mean, the working hours are unbelievable. And so there has to be an increase in support, and that can increase in interest of teachers. Large amount of teachers, you can perhaps down the road reduce the class sizes.
Right.
And ideally, you know, there are a lot of, I think, blocks and stuff that I'm not totally, you know, up to date on or understanding, but at a basic fundamental level, I think that's an issue.
Going back to the interest of teachers to become educators in Japan, and also let's go to the international schools here in Japan from that point of view. How do you think we can help and support these teachers even more, Nikolai, to not really like lose their passion and lose their enthusiasm in teaching, you know, as a school, right? And I know I have to learn from you both, because you worked in for many years in running an inclusive classroom, and I know it's not easy, and it's just my second year, and I can see the difference when I was in a regular classroom and when I do the inclusive education approach. And there are so many needs, and there are so many things that you have to do for the child and for the family, and sometimes it can be emotionally and mentally taxing. So how can we support as a leader or a coordinator of a special education support, and as a school principal? So how can we support this in such a way that teachers will maintain and retain their passion and enthusiasm towards their work?
Alisha, can you go first?
Well, I think one thing that we try to do, and I think we do pretty well, is we really want our teachers to go home when it's time to go home. You know, we want the work-life balance as best as possible, because we want, and we've been working on kind of the idea of flourishing as a staff, not just within the classroom context. We talk a lot about teaching and a lot about what's going on in the classroom, but getting our staff to kind of make some goals for their own well-being outside. So we did this in March, and we're going to continue doing this through the start of the new school year. And every staff meeting, we kind of go around and say, all right, am I maintaining my goals? Some people, one of their main goals was sleep, getting to bed earlier, taking care of themselves. Others, it was exercise. Others, it was staying off their phones. So I think really encouraging staff to take care of themselves on top of what they do at school has been one thing we've started, and we're going to keep doing. But even before that, it was very much, these are our hours, please don't work overtime. We know that this is part of your dedication coming through, but we also feel like it's very important to turn your brain off and give it rest, and really is that 10, 15, 20, 30 minutes after school going to matter tomorrow? And maybe the answer is yes sometimes, but most of the time it's not. And so that's one thing we do. But I think another thing is really getting professional development for teachers.
Yes.
And it's harder to do in Japan because most of our teachers want want professional development in English, and
Right.
finding some of that professional development in English, whether it's online, whether it's in person, some of that has been impacted greatly from the pandemic and starting to recover, but slowly but surely. Because I think as you want to be inclusive, not every teacher's background is in inclusive education or special education. So every classroom teacher can learn how to approach different students, how to focus. I was talking to a friend, and she was saying, equity versus equality, having that idea in mind. And it's something that I think we need to keep in mind. But it's one thing for it to come from your administrator. It's another thing to get into a classroom, get into a situation with other educators and have an expert kind of impart some wisdom. And I think that's a really difficult thing for us in Japan, that as much as possible, I will continue kind of promoting what I know is going on with TAIP or other places, but really helping teachers connect in that way as well.
Amazing. Yeah, it's not just their work, encouraging them to be good at their work, but also like encouraging their personal life as well to be who they are, in the sense that, don't lose your own personal obligations as well, And Nikolai?
Yeah, sorry. Can you repeat the original question one more time? Just I want to make sure I address, because I listened to Alicia's response.
How can we support our teachers in order for them to kind of like, not to lose their passion and enthusiasm towards what they do?
Yeah. So I think, just as Alisha was saying, I think as having a principal of a school like Alisha, where the leadership, the person who's the principals or the leadership of the school is supportive of the teachers, understand we're really lucky and fortunate at our school. We have an amazing principal who really supports all of us, the teachers, not only as teachers, but as human beings too.
Yes. Yeah.
So really understands us and sort of make sure that we're being, understood as human beings. Are we getting enough sleep and taking care of ourselves?
Right.
And that's super important. I think that's so critically important. And then I think another thing is that understanding is an extremely important word of every individual who's involved. I mean, at the foremost, it's the student and the full understanding of the student. But also, I mean, as for the teachers, I think it's for them, I'd like to say, in my case, and I'm speaking for my case, but teachers, teachers become teachers, as a sort of a calling that, that it comes from a place of a real sort of care and sort of, I'd like to help in some way.
Yes.
For, students and the education, I'd like to be helpful, so there's a calling, and it can spark from having a great teacher when one was young and trying to have the same impact that teacher had on us, or
right.
And there's a lot of time that goes into becoming a teacher. You need to first start with your bachelor's degree.
Yes.
And then you have to complete your teaching licensure. You with multiple professions. There's a lot of time that goes into it, and it's not sort of just on a whim that sort of like, okay, I want it's there's a careful amount of time and care and I think that, for me, in my case, right, I struggled a lot of, like, in school with a lot of the executive function skills, my time management and organization. I had a lot of difficult, and that was sort of my sort of initiative to sort of, I like to work in an area where I can work with students who have, similar challenges that I
right.
So, from my position, it's working extremely hard to try and focus on understanding the student and the facts, and then the communication happens with the parents, and I'd like, everyone to understand that, teachers are ones who care a lot about the students and understanding the students and their work, and that it's really it's teachers become teachers because they care a lot.
Yeah.
About the it's there's so many other jobs to choose from.
Right.
But teacher's a very specific one that is that understanding about teachers from the leadership, of course, and then also from the government as well. And I can't understand, unless I'm missing something, why there isn't more support from the government. I mean, we're talking about international schools, but in the Japanese schools, if we're focused on Japan,
right?
I know teachers who work in Japanese schools who work like 12 hours and are doing so much with the love and care for the students at the foremost of their efforts.
Right.
They spend the whole day. Everything they say matters when you're a teacher. You have to think so carefully about everything you say, how you word it,
right,
how you model your behavior, how you speak to everyone.
Yes.
And it's mentally exhausting, and it's a very important job.
Yeah.
And I can't understand how the government cannot understand how critical it's a proactive solutions job as a teacher.
Yeah.
A lot of governments have these reactive solutions to problems, but education is a proactive solution to loads of problems that may future occur. I don't. So
do we have to voice it out? In some ways, like TAIP could be the voice of these teachers for international schools, right? And there should be like an avenue for us to kind of like work together. And I know there's another network, Japan Learning Support Network, who could actually, team up. Maybe we can collaborate and team up with these organizations and voice it out. And I think like the focus here is teachers' mental health in a way, right? Because we always focus on the students' mental health, but also the teacher's mental health in terms of, yes, Nikolai.
I just also say, and physical health.
Yes.
I mean, like the average amount of hours that a teacher sleeps. I mean, I don't know how much research is on that. But also, I mean, knowing a lot of teachers, I mean, the physical health as well is sort of, I mean, mental health, but of course, that too, the physical health, how many, teachers, how they take care of themselves, because they're prioritizing. It's a job where you it's really difficult sometimes not to take it home with you.
Right.
Because the students are so important. And so I mean, just that's important. The mental and physical health, of course, is not an issue for all teachers, but I think is an issue to think about.
So I think also let's start from us, right? The organization itself, the TAIP. I think in terms of, because we all have these topics in conferences that we talk about education, how we teach, what to teach, and why we teach, but we don't have so much for like how we handle ourselves as an educator, right? So, and how we balance our as what Miss Alisha said, like work-life balance. So I think, do you think we can have more topics for our conferences so that we can help teachers on how to take care of themselves, Miss Alisha?
Yeah, I actually think the focus is so much on students and getting more knowledge on what you want to bring to the classroom and things like that. But I think even within the international schooling community, we forget to ask those questions and make sure the teachers are all doing all right. And I mean, I think this was probably exacerbated when we were all trying to deal with COVID and all of the instructions coming down from the government and trying to find all of these things out. And we realized how much of a toll it was taking on people, students, families, teachers, everybody. But I think we should take that lesson from that time during COVID and continue really taking care of teachers, because in the international schooling community, especially, our teachers are often international. They're often far from family. They're far from their regular support network that they have in their home countries, and that we need to do a good job of taking care of each other within our school communities itself, but also sharing between schools how we're doing that for our teachers. Because I know in larger international schools, basically each year they have a turnover rate of 1/4 to 1/3 of their teachers, especially their expat teachers that leave. Some of that may be just that's what they intended from the beginning, but if schools did a good job and made a concerted effort to really make sure their teachers are doing well physically, mentally, that they have the support system in place from their school and in the wider communities that they reside in, that we might have a stronger, well, I can't say might, we would have a stronger international schooling community in general if teachers' well-being was prioritized as much as our students' well-being was.
Right. Okay. And just to kind of like, I just remember, because Tokyo International Progressive School's principal, Miss Lynn Sato, she was not able to join us because of other commitments. So I want to make a shout out to her. and I think I just remember her because of the school leadership, how Nikolai expressed that she has done so well in taking care and looking after the teachers. And I think it will always start from the administration, right? Like from the the head of the department or the school. And I think on how you perceive and how you take this perspective from the teachers, like if you know what they're doing inside the classroom and you know how hard it is, then I think you will create a wonderful environment for them. And that's Nikolai and Miss Alisha. I love what I heard today, and I think this is going to be an eye opener for these schools as well, not just for inclusive classrooms, but also international schools in general. Like, you have to look after your teachers, value them, listen to them, and make sure that they are being taken care of. You know, it's not just paying them, it's not just giving them workloads, or it's not just about stressing them out. I'm sorry for that term, but but it's all about looking after them and become a community, you know, and supporting each other. And I hope that all the leaders out there, you're listening. This is a very good tip from Nikolai and Miss Alisha. And then I'm looking right now at the questions that we have provided last time. And I think we've covered, like, I would say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, right? So, and I think this is kind of like a very much of a what do you call this, like a symbiosis and synopsis of everything that we have talked about with the past like 20 minutes. And one of the things that I would like to talk about this time is the success stories or positive changes that you've seen as a result when you're working in an inclusive classroom. So let's start off with Nikolai this time.
Yeah. So with successful inclusion, I mean, the main thing is sort of if there's the self-esteem piece. So when again at a very fundamental level, understanding the individuals, you know, and that's only really possible again when you have smaller class size and you can have the opportunities to speak one-on-one with a student. Okay, learn about all the sorts of the interests. Okay, how do you like to, what are the ways in which you like to prefer learning? Okay, and then also, like, sometimes I'm amazed sometimes as well when I speak to some students, when I talk to them, okay, so tell me about your strengths, and then they say, I don't have any. It's like, well, I'm sorry, that's not possible. Let's sit down and talk about it. But again, that's having the time in order to do that. And again, that's staffing as having enough teachers that are available to do that. So the small class sizes and again, you know, sometimes, you know, there's so many factors going on that need to be considered. So I think everything is understood from the facts. What are the facts about this student? What is the fact about perhaps if they have a learning difference? What are the facts about that? And then understanding the student at this individual level. Then the student starts to say, oh, I didn't really think about that. Oh, also, for example, you know, if you're sitting with a student one-on-one, then you introduce some sort of support that exists, or some sort of strategy to deal with a challenge. Tell me about your challenges. Well, I have a difficult time remembering, you know, when I have to complete things. Oh, okay, let's sit down, let's spend. And I work with students, for example, setting up, I use Google Calendar as, you know, a very like cohesive sort of system using Google Calendar. The students
very practical.
Yeah, the students at our school think I'm sponsored by Google Calendar. But again, it's like, oh, I didn't know this existed. And then sort of the time as well to work with that student more and repeating, sort of working on that.
Yeah.
those are success stories, the sort of success stories of where student realized, I never realized, like, and then again, I think we were talking, John, when I visited your school, we talked about Gardner and his multiple intelligences.
Yes.
And so, introducing some sort of, things that exist, the student can choose to do with the information that they like.
Yes.
But we can introduce that this exists, right? So I introduced about, of course, there are many theories on intelligence, but I introduced Gardner's theory of multiple intelligences. And, I've spoken to, like, where I introduced to students, and they're like, well, I never knew about this. I think I have visual spatial intelligence.
Right.
Well, that was a thing with, like, a definition and sort of, and then there's a sort of, I guess I do kind of have. And then you also can spend the time when it comes, we were talking about neurodiversity before, you talk about, okay, for example, right, what are different strengths that you have, and right, neurodiversity is every brain is different, everyone, so you focus, every single person has in this whole world has their unique strengths, unique challenges, and sort of, when a student starts to understand a little more, like, they sit down and write down, okay, here are my strengths and challenges, okay, and then really understands himself, there's the self-esteem, you start to see it sort of come. And that's a real feeling of success. And student starts to build more of these independent skills, and then also, and I think that's the success stories where the student can rebuild some self-esteem that they might have lost at some point due to whatever circumstances throughout. But it's not easy. Of course, there needs to be the time, there needs to be there needs to be a lot of other factors, going on that are important. I wish this is ideally, like, these cases have happened.
Right.
I work with students, and we sit down and we talk about strengths and challenges and some strategies for the challenges, and there's some real success, but there's a lot of factors that go on that we don't have control over as as teachers. And then but those are some success stories, and I'd like to say more often than not, these success stories happen, when there's the time available to do it.
Thank you, Nikolai. And Miss Alisha?
I think because I'm not a classroom teacher, it looks a little bit different for me to talk about success stories. But as a school that realized we wanted to be more inclusive a little bit later, I mean, we're only 20 years old, so a little bit later is only like 6 or 7 years ago. I think we've learned from each case, each child who's come to us, and sometimes it fits well. Sometimes all of the resources line up outside of the classroom and inside of the classroom, and a child grows in the way that their support team is hoping for and what we're hoping for. And other times we haven't, as Nikolai even mentioned, like, when you have the time and are able to dedicate that time and really figure out all of the angles of what needs to happen, you find more success. But sometimes, and this kind of goes back a little bit to what Japan has and hasn't got to offer, is that sometimes families are limited in what they can provide in the therapy side of things, especially when they want therapy in English and have Japanese insurance, for example. There's just some limitations on financial abilities for certain families. And that's not to say we won't work with them, but it makes the hurdle much higher for everybody involved. And so not every story can be a success story. And, we've had students, and since we're dealing more with early education, we really want to set up students for success as they move through their educational experience. And if we can help in our little time with them, I actually reached out to a former family, and with this particular student, they came and didn't realize he needed a shadow and what the supports were all that needed to be put into place. We figured it out together. The family was able to work outside and inside the classroom. And he's now in elementary school in the US. He doesn't need a shadow in the classroom.
Wow.
He's got whatever supports he needs. It's not something that the schooling system in the US can't handle. And he's thriving. So there are those stories for every kind of, it didn't work out exactly as we would have liked story. There's success stories that go along with that. And I think when, probably with TIPS and with YCS as well, when you have this really close working relationship with these students students and families. You keep in touch and you find out how they're growing and see how well they're doing after they leave. And I think that is part of the blessing of being in international schooling, because oftentimes if you're in the public schools in the US or in another country, once the student is away from your school, you may never ever hear from them again. But because of the community that's built through international schools, you get to keep tabs on some of your students in a different way. That's something we are so blessed to have by creating these communities.
I think like what you both said is really like, it's a success story, you know. and I feel like, you know, what I feel that there is a tiny victory, no matter how small the victory is, I celebrate it with the children, you know. And I feel like when, for my success story, I think when the children are starting to talk to themselves in a positive language, like rather than say I can't do it, they would say, oh yes, definitely I can do it. And when the parents are always in working in partnership with you. And I think that's really, for me, what truly inspires me to become educators, because they truly believe in what you do. If people are believing in what you do and they see positive progress and positive language all the time from the child, you know, rather than saying, did I do something bad? You know, that really melts my heart when a child would say, did I do something bad? That means that he's being kind of like told off many times about the bad things that you can do, rather than focusing on the strengths that you have. And Nikolai just mentioned earlier about Howard Gardner's multiple intelligence. And I think one thing that I really focus on there is the intrapersonal intelligence, which is kind of like recognizing your own emotions, how you deal with it, how you can be, how can you help yourself when you're out of whack, in just in layman's term. And also that can include Dan Siegel's the whole brain child. Like there is the upstairs brain and the downstairs brain. When your downstairs brain is out of whack, it's all over the place, your upstairs brain would have to control that. And I think in order for us to teach the children on how to control their emotion, to be successful with it, you have to acknowledge their emotions. You know, every behavior, every emotion that your child would show you, it's an indication of they want to communicate, they want to connect. And you got to understand how can you get and hold their hand tightly and tell them, I'm here. You know, I'm not going to go anywhere. I'm here to support you. I'm here to hold your hand, and let's traverse this long path of understanding your emotions. And I think my school really focuses on social and emotional development, because I truly believe that if there is a high demand for behavior, there's kind of like low interest in learning. So you really have to make sure that the behaviors are kind of like in place in the right way, and you have to address and acknowledge their emotions as much as you can. So that's just really like, we're a young school, but I'm learning a lot. And I think that's also a success story for me, that I learned from these children so much. And apart from learning from you both, and you know, and some readings that I do here and there, and it's just really fulfilling for me each time. Right, so that's amazing to hear from both of you. And one of the things that I also want to touch in this podcast is, as an international community, how can we support or promote inclusion in Japan? Like, what is our role? What could be our main role as international schools in order to support inclusion here in Japan? Who would like to answer this question first? Nikolai?
I think just in terms of you mentioned the word community earlier, and so we have a lot of people involved in the community. That's, again, you know, so we have the student, we have the parents, we have the teachers, we have the school, we have the government. I think a very important thing is that we need to support each other. Everyone is trying in this equation. Everyone is trying their best in this equation. And if that's understood at that fundamental level, that everyone is really, 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 really trying, there's that level of support for each other. In terms of this question about, you know, again, can you repeat it one more time, John?
What
I just want
role
to
can the international community play in promoting inclusion? Yes.
Right. So again, so I think for this, I think the facts are important, right? And what are the facts about the current state of inclusive education? What are the facts about the current trends and directions of inclusive education? What is inclusive education? How is it defined? What are the facts about how successful inclusive education takes place? And then, I think in terms of Japan, right? What can we do as an international community? So I mean, if we're talking about support for international families and this trend of sort of the international background families moving to Japan is likely to increase and has been increasing. So I think information is absolutely critical and key. When you search on a Google search in your home language, what kind of information appears? How accessible is that information?
Yes.
I made a website about 5 years I was mentioning to you, called diverseneedsjapan.com, and I made this website at that time to provide, and this is one of my summer projects to update it.
Yeah.
Because obviously with our jobs, we're extremely busy.
Yeah.
But I made this website because I wanted there to be some kind of website with English information about educational opportunities in Japan. And so it's a website where I think I ran the website. Please, anyone email me with any sort of information that you think should be added to the website and so on. But something like this, I think there could be a huge upgrade and improvement on my website by somebody where there's very all the key facts and information and translations. I mean, I think actually a lot of the technology for translating is improving now, and this will hopefully make a difference. But, a lot of, I think it's not good to assume that people truly know where to find the information. It has to be, actually Miss Sato, she always says, clear is kind, right? So it has to be as clear as possible, where to find the information, how to access the information, what is the factual information.
Yes.
And again, it's just, can there be some kind of, just more clarity of these. I think that's important as an international background and international community. Is sort of working together and make sure that information is so accessible. And I think there are many families who are working on making sure that other families know this information. I think Alisha maybe might know more of that there are the supports in place, but it's finding them in an easy way. It's really important. And again, supporting each other.
Yes. Thank you, Nikolai. And Miss Alisha?
Well, I was going to say, not every international family is looking for an international school, right? Sometimes it's financial. Sometimes it's they want an immersion experience for their kids, different things like that. So also having what supports are available from Japan, because there are good supports. It's not always doom and gloom on the Japan side, but it's very difficult to find information on support that can be useful for students that want to be included. I know there's subsidies that and different things that are available through the Japanese government that wouldn't necessarily be able to be known unless they know to go to the ward office, go to this section, talk to these folks. So even a compilation of things that are available via the Japanese government, whether it's language support, whether it's, because I know there's some of our students even have it's kind of like a Chidio kind of thing that's basically a subsidy for students that need therapy, and then they can go to certain therapy centers, and there's a huge discount to those students if they've turned in, I don't know all, clearly I don't even know all the details, but there are things that are open to anybody living in Japan, not just a Japanese national. And so that information, and maybe even coupling that with your website, Nikolai, because I think a lot of international families assume that they're only going to get support through the school their children go to, but that there are other supports out there that, and depending on where you live, Yokohama is a very multicultural place, and Tokyo is as well. It all depends on kind of where you live within that metropolitan area, but there is a lot out there. And even knowing, go to this section of your ward office and ask some questions, maybe just the amount of information they need to actually go searching, when if they didn't even know it existed, they wouldn't have it. So I think your website sounds really great for English speakers. And even like you said, I mean, that Google Translate function, even if it's only available in English, it's really helpful these days, where even 2-3 years ago, we didn't even have that option.
Right. And I'm going to share that website, Nikolai, at the end of this podcast, like as part of the blurb, so that you expect a lot of traffic.
So again, once ongoing summer projects are updated. So
yes.
I have to, but I think, that even if, there's some information that, needs to be added to it. I'm positive that there is on my website, but new information that leads to new information. So so you learn, okay, this exists. Okay, like a search of that. There are other websites that talk about, okay, then a search of that and a search of that. And it can lead to, as Alisha was just saying, there are all these opportunities that exist, but perhaps the information is not so clearly, and I could be wrong about that as well. But again, I think that sort of new information leading to new information could be just reaching out, ward office, they share about this, interesting. Reach out to this person. This person knows about this, and then sort of it starts to appear those opportunities that do exist, and sort of, and I think that's really important, because that would be very helpful and supportive for families who are looking for some kind of support.
Right. Yeah. I remember when there was this family, and the dad told me they had no clue where to go to in terms of getting support for the child. And then once they found this one therapist, and this therapist would connect this family to another therapist, and that therapist would connect it. It's just really like, once you get connected to somebody, it will spread like wildfire, that you're going to get the services that you need as long as you search for it. And I think rather than doing that, if we have like a certain website, or like, Nikolai, your website could be a good prototype, that we can actually, use that as a hub for information, where to find resources. I think it's very important for families, especially those who are coming from abroad, those expat families who would need these kinds of support. And I've received a lot of inquiries from Singapore, from Hong Kong, from US, Canada, and they are actually looking for resources. And before they make a decision in coming to Japan, they always tell me, I want to make sure that we've got the right resources. And just with one click, maybe Nikolai's website, we just click on this website, and then you'll find all the resources and contact these people. Even like those freelancing therapists as well, I think it's very important for them to have an avenue to promote themselves and be visible. And we are now in the era of information. It's just really like right out there, information era. And I think we really need to make this resource and manage this resource effectively and easily, So wow, I've learned so much today. And before we go, this is the last question that I would love to ask, like, because we are all working in a neurodiverse environment. So, and this, for me, it's somehow I want to emphasize this at the end of the podcast. Like, what do we have to do in order for us to ensure that all voices are heard and represented in our school? And I think this is a very impactful message that we want to bring in before we end this podcast. I want to bring in that, as educators and school leaders, what can we do in order for all the parents, teachers, and even the whole community, for them to feel that they're valued and being heard? So let's start off with Miss Alisha.
That's not a small question, though, is it? I think we at smaller schools actually have a little bit of an easier time in doing this, because our communities are smaller by nature, smaller a little bit on purpose. And so really reaching out and checking in, especially on the families of kids that are struggling a little bit more, or parents who may be struggling a little bit more, like really making that effort, making those connections, being out and talking with families that drop off, being out. And I don't know if, especially since TIPS has a lot more older children, so it may not, we have preschoolers through elementary. So our parents are involved in drop off and pick up a lot.
Right.
And so just being out, having conversations, not expecting parents to always sit down at their computer and email you when they want to ask a question, because generally they're not going to ask the little questions via email. Something that's small that they think might burden the teacher or might burden an administrator, they're not going to mention. Whereas if you're accessible to them and out and about and chatting with kids, chatting with their parents, they're probably more likely to connect with you, ask those questions. And every question, whether I can answer it at the moment or I have to say, I need to do some research on that, let me get back to you, and then get back to them, that those small relationships just build and create the type of community that we want to be. And it isn't always easy. And especially with all of the COVID, I go back to COVID because as an administrator, that was a really big part of what we did the last 4 years. But I think rebuilding and reestablishing those relationships that were easier to maintain before we went through those 4 years, just doing that same thing again, being out, being seen, being known. Sorry, I have a child who just tried to edit this bit out, and just really creating and that community. And in our philosophy statement, we even say our goal is to partner with parents. That is what we put out there right at the beginning. It is a partnership. You know your child better than we do. We know them in this specific setting, but you know them from birth to when we've met them, And so that is who we want to be as a school, and that partnership is really important. But that is our community. That's what we want to be, a partnering community, of partnering teachers and parents and administrators, all doing our part to successfully grow this child, not just academically, but socially, emotionally, spiritually. That's all what we want to do together. So yeah, that's our goal.
Absolutely amazing. And Nikolai?
So I'll keep it brief then. TIP starts from grade 4, as you're saying. So TIPS, that's our Tokyo International Progressive School TIPS. And so and I think the 3 words are kindness, understanding, and facts. And the facts from the information, that the accessibility to the information that are the facts. The kindness, understanding, and facts. And then the understanding, having the time to be able to have this full understanding from a full communication and understanding, no assumptions and no this, and because everyone is trying, and there has to be the support and understanding for each other. So it's this kindness, understanding, and facts about everything, all the topics we mentioned today, about successful inclusive education, about neurodiversity. There's a limit to what TIPS can do as well. But everyone is trying. And I think those 3 words, kindness, understanding, and facts, are absolutely the key. And hopefully that things, and I think that things get better for all those unanswered questions. And yeah, so that's
thank you. Yeah, thank you. I think it also aligns with LIS, Lighthouse International School's values, like be kind, be respectful, and be responsible. So I think it's just really one of the things that we value in our school, because we teach children to what we want them to be in terms of understanding themselves and valuing themselves, and valuing other people as well. It's just really not easy for us schools to just one day you wake up in the morning and everybody would just do the same thing. It's an ongoing process. It's really like something that you have to do each and every day, and to respect and to hear and represent the voices of every families, and working in partnership with the families as well is just as important. And I'm just so glad that I had this conversation with you both today, and it's just really an eye-opener for me. And I hope that we can do more podcasts, or even we can do like a big conference for inclusive schools here in Japan, and to have more support for teachers, and to maintain and to retain their profession in the most optimal way. And we all want to support each other, right, Nikolai?
Yes, absolutely.
Right. And of course, as I've said, we are going to share Nikolai's diverse needs in Japan website And I think this is going to be a good start wherein we can get information, and it's going to be an information hub for families, not just for families, but also for teachers, in order for us to support each other and to have the specifics of such therapies or schools, inclusive schools that can support your child in every step of the way. And so I would like to thank you. Hats off to you both, Miss Alisha and Nikolai. I learned so much, and thank you all.
Thank you for listening to TAIP Conversations. This has been a presentation of the Tokyo Association of International Preschools. To find out more, please visit our website at www.tokyopreschools.org. If you enjoyed what you heard today, please help to spread the word.